Okay.
Okay, hello everybody. We are doing a live interview with Jim Voigt, and Jim Voigt's with Columbia Auto Service. And Jim, if you could just do a brief introduction of you, your shop, and a little bit of the history, please.
Okay. Hi. As Kelly said, Jim Voigt from Columbia Auto Service. We're in Waterloo. Right now we have a 9-bay shop. I'm third generation in my family to operate the automotive business. Started off years ago myself with just 3 bays, doing okay. Got involved with Kelly Bennett to do some training, and things took off from there. And we've just been growing ever since. So
I believe
happy to
that
talk to
you started taking training with us in 2005, somewhere around there.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
And what year did you start with take over from your dad, or did you work with your dad for a while? I don't know that part of the story.
I worked with my father when I was an apprentice, and then in about 1987, 88, he decided to leave the trade and left me to run the family business.
Okay. Actually, I started my business in 1987. So I want to get into some of the changes that you made, particularly with pre-booking appointments. And one of the things I recall when you would be in our management groups is you used to say that you hated Februarys. Why did you hate Februarys?
Well, just February was always so slow, and I just couldn't stand showing up to work at any morning and not seeing any vehicles booked into the shop that day.
Now, was that your dad's experience as well?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
And probably his dad too.
Yeah.
You've heard me talk about Bob O'Connor. He was my mentor, and a lot more intestinal fortitude. He was an American, very bold. I know if he was running the group at the time, if you said, I hate Februarys, my dad hated Februarys, and my dad's dad hated Februarys, he would probably say, so you've known this for 3 generations and you haven't done anything about it.
Yeah,
I'm not quite that bold, but the concept is there. So another thing that I recall specifically beginning, when you first were in the group, is you talked about people coming in and wanting more work done than they had an appointment for, and you didn't seem to appreciate people doing that to you.
Well, we weren't booking our day properly and not leaving enough hours in the day for the obvious things that we were going to experience. I say obvious now because it is obvious now, but at that time it wasn't. But just like Bob O'Connor would have said, people are going to show up for an oil change and say, well, it's here, can you do this or that or something else? So why don't you plan for it instead of complaining about it?
Well, I've asked that question to shop owners tens of thousands over the years, and they say, how many people want more work done than they had an appointment for? They come in for an oil change, by the way, while it's here. Or sometimes they say, well, by the way, while you're in there, could you also do this? And I recall you saying it really pissed you off when people did that. And I recall saying, well, according to Bob O'Connor, what they're really saying is, I'd like to spend more money today than I thought I would. So you've revolutionized that, and you very quickly became the king of pre-booking appointments. I remember speaking in Las Vegas, I think it was 2005, and it was at the Cars Convention, and you had started just before then pre-booking appointments, and our focus was February because you used to hate February. And I remember you sending an email, and I remember reading it to the group and saying, here's Jim Voigt in November saying, I already have 44 pre-booked appointments for November. And when we talked earlier today, you said, that's all. But back in the day, 44 was absolutely huge. And then I recalled that you were going to go on vacation with your family. It seems to me it was over spring break. And you were going off to Newfoundland. Now you say you've been 5 times, but I think that was your first. And you had so many pre-booked appointments. I remember you saying, my only hope is that not too many people show up without having appointments. So my question is, when you first started this, were you getting resistance from people about pre-booking appointments because it was foreign to them?
Well, I wasn't getting a lot of resistance because it quickly became clear that people loved that service and expected that service. I remember booking an appointment for a lady at the counter, and I apologized for not doing it before and said, here's how we're going to do things from now on. And she said, well, it's about time you started doing this. And, I'd say almost 99% of all the clients we have just expect it to be done when they're at the counter here now. So it's become
But
a way of life.
the fear people have is that the people are going to say no. And so the fear of rejection, I ask them if they want to make an appointment, they say no. And I go, oh, well, I tried, it didn't work.
Well, the the easiest thing for me to say in order to get everybody on board is to quickly show how it would be a great benefit to the client if we went ahead and made the next appointment to organize their time and make sure they don't miss out on maintenance that they need. And it's a benefit to the client, and they quickly realize that. And if you say it to the client in a way that you know it's a benefit to them, they'll agree to it. If you're uncomfortable yourself and you don't believe in it, they can tell that when you're trying to book the appointment. So the first step is get over yourself and believe it and trust that it's the best thing for the customer.
So, but how did you decide what an appointment would be booked for? A lot of people say to me, well, all that you could do that was with oil changes. So did you start just with oil changes pre-booking, or how did you do that?
Well, that's obviously a starting point for a lot of things, but if you're going to be a maintenance shop, you have to quickly realize that there's more to maintenance than oil changes. And any shop with the computerization today has a history of their clients, so they know when was the last time they had brake maintenance or cooling system flush or new spark plugs. So it's a good chance to look at the maintenance schedule, look at the history, and let the customer know that their next visit is going to include an oil change and it's going to include tire rotation or a brake service or whatever they need. But you can pre-book anything if you're going to perform a inspection and you see that the client is getting low on brakes but doesn't need brakes right away. You can book their appointment 2 months down the road and say, we're going to do this before it becomes a problem, and make sure that you don't forget, because forgetting is going to create a safety issue. And you can pre-book all of that service.
Have you ever pre-booked the timing belt?
Absolutely. And whenever the maintenance schedule says something's due, we'll pre-book for it.
And what a great service for the customer, preventing the possible, breakdown. I recall recently somebody actually in your area was in one of my classes, and they told the customer about the timing belt, and he said he thought he'd let it go, and he actually ended up driving over the border into the United States. His timing belt went, so he had to have his vehicle towed back. And it's a funny story because he had to find a tow truck driver that actually had a passport, because he wasn't allowed in the country, the tow truck driver, without a passport. So he wishes he had that timing belt done. I don't know if you remember this, but you and I went to your Napa store that you were buying from. And I remember buying this Napa truck. I don't know if you remember that, but the guy at the store said, I love Jim. He said, I wish everybody would pre-book appointments because it allows you to pre-order more parts, right?
For sure.
It seems
every day we start printing the work orders for the next day and call the Napa store and make the order, and that night or the next morning all of the parts for that day start rolling through the door, and everything's here and organized on the shelf waiting for the technicians to take their work orders and start working.
And I recall you used to phone people 5 days out. That just seemed to be instead of phoning people the next day. And I've heard that from dentists, that they phone earlier now. It's not like years ago where they'd phone you and say your appointment's tomorrow. Mm-hmm. They said, because people started saying tomorrow, it can't be tomorrow. No, please don't tell me it's tomorrow. So I don't know, do you still call, or how do you remind people of these appointments?
Well, we've now got a system that does emails. 99% of all our clients communicate through email. So we do it twice. We do it 10 days and 3 days ahead. 10 days ahead gives everybody enough time to reschedule the appointment comfortably if there's a conflict with that, and 3 days before. The second reminder seems to really work well with keeping people on schedule.
Now, in your case, does your shop management system, let's say I'm in your shop today and you make an appointment for me 2 months from now, do you tell your shop management system today to remind me 10 days before the appointment?
It's automatically, it's built in automatically. If I book your appointment for 2 months or 3 months or 6 months down the road, once it's set in the computer, the system will send out the emails.
Now, of course, not everybody has a system that will do that. I mean, I know some people that use like QuickBooks to run their shop, which is kind of silly, but that's not going to be able to do it. So, but back in the day where you didn't have the technology, it was phone calls, right?
Yes.
So back in the day when you first started, what would you say the no-show rate was? How many of these people didn't show up? Or maybe a better way of asking is, how many people would you say kept the day, the time that you initially scheduled?
Easily over 90% of all of the pre-books showed up when their appointment was.
Even when you first started?
I Yeah, I recall it
Wow.
being
Okay.
a very high 90% of the 9 out of 10 people would show up for their appointment, no problem. The no shows was a really minor situation.
See, I've heard a lot of people say, and I think it's the way you communicate it, the way you say that you educated the customer and told them about the benefit. Because what I've heard, Jim, is people say, I called the customer to remind them of the appointment. They say, what appointment? I don't remember making an appointment. Did you hear that? Sometimes people say, I don't have an appointment.
Yeah, well, some people forget, and you know the the point is they don't have to remember. They know they're going to get the reminder call 10 days and 3 days before with our clients. So once the appointment's made, they don't have to remember it. But I think sometimes the problem with customers not showing up is the weakness of the message, the conviction of the appointment. The importance of the appointment being communicated to the client. If it's just an oil change and it's blank sort of 3 months or whatever down the road, you know people are going to ignore those messages because they seem very personal. Or when we pre-book the customer's next appointment, they know that we've looked at their history. This is a special appointment that we've created for them, and we know what we're going to do and why we're going to do it and the benefits of it. And it's more important when you know that this is a specially planned appointment for you, not just it's been 3 months since you've been here, so we're going to call you and say you need something.
See, I think some people, they lighten it so much, they'll just say, we've made an appointment for you for 3 months from now, and that's it. So it's not clear to the customer, but you're taking the time to make it clear that they have an appointment. Now, do you have, like on the oil change sticker, does it tell them when they're coming back?
Well, the oil change sticker is a reminder, but like I said, so many of our clients are just used to the way we schedule the next appointment. They expect it, and
But back in the
they
day,
don't
though,
they
because
don't
some
look at the
people,
sticker.
yeah, but some people are thinking, you know, right now you've got all these appointments, but back when you first started, the oil change sticker, for example, did you say your next service is, and you put the actual date? I've always thought it weird. Then I get an oil change, and there's a sticker there that says when the mileage is due for an oil change and the date approximately. And yet, what you're doing is taking that one step further and communicating that it's an appointment. It's not just suggesting that you come back around that time, but you actually
Yeah.
have an appointment to come back. Now, do
Yeah.
you give
Well,
them a card or something? How do you do that? How do you communicate? Is there anything when they leave that day that says when that appointment is?
a lot of people just get out their organizer or their phone now and put it into their system. Times change. Times have changed so much in the last, even 2 or 3 years. The amount of people that are carrying around um, phones that they just put an appointment in there as soon as you mention it because it's there and they don't have to remember it. That's just a way of life. I mean, people are more able to be organized when it comes to making appointments. I remember, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, I was talking to a customer at the counter and we made her appointment, and she got out a book, an appointment book, and started leafing through the pages. And I remember saying to myself, boy,
Wow.
that's an old thing. I haven't seen that for a long time because, that 10 years ago, that was just the way things were done. You got out your little appointment book. Women were always great for pulling it out of their purse and opening it up, and that seems like old fashioned now. But
What's the phone? I had a bank appointment and I put it in my Google Calendar. And then the next time I was looking at a Google map for something, I see this dot and it shows where the bank is, and it tells me right there I have an appointment. I thought, oh my God, it's on the Google calendar. And I remember being in Costco that day, and a message pops up and says I need to leave now to be at the appointment in time. So customers have the technology. It's phenomenal. So, okay, so how have things changed over the years? Like you used to have 44 pre-booked appointments. How many would you say you have approximately now?
Over 700.
You see that so simply. 700.
Well, I mean, it, it's become a way of life now. You know, when I talk to shop owners that don't pre-book the appointment or don't have that many appointments in their schedule, I I scoff at them. I mean, it's just the way life has to be now. There's no way around it. And for me, it's just as simple as putting my pants on in the morning. You know, we pre-book appointments. Customers expect it, and that's the way our shop is organized.
Now, you've got 3 advisors now, and I suspect that it's easier for them because that's the way they learned it from day one. It's not like somebody's had an advisor for 5 years and has to get out of the habit of not pre-booking and get into the habit of pre-booking. You teach your people right away, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So the last question I have for you is, how do you track it? Is it done in your shop management system? Like, could you look at your appointments that you already have for February in this case? Is it on a calendar or is it part of your shop?
I'm sorry, Kelly. Can you rephrase that question? I didn't quite understand it.
So how do you track it? Like, I remember years ago, you used to have that flip thing and you had the appointments in the 1 through 31, right? That was way back in the day.
Okay.
But right now, if you wanted to look at February, how could you know how many appointments you have? Is it a calendar?
Yeah, no, the scheduler in our protractor system, you just click on it and it'll open up the days of the month and it'll show you right there how many hours available, how many hours are booked, how many cars are booked. And it'll tell you I can look at the months in a flash and tell you if there's any days that aren't already fully booked.
Fully?
Yes.
So do you build reserve time into your day because those people are still wanting more work done?
Yes, we try to build 30% of our day as reserve. When we look at when we set the available hours in there, we set only 5 or 6 hours per technician, so that there's the available hours for add-ons and extra things and customers that have a problem that you can't pre-book.
So safe to say you no longer hate February.
No, I don't enjoy. There's no month in the year. Well, November is getting pretty crazy because of how many tires we have, but that's a good problem to have. Yeah.
Now, that's a good question when you're talking about tires. Like, if I come in the winter, or sorry, at the end of the winter, let's say I come in March and you take off my winters, are you actually making the appointment to have those winters put back on in November?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the perfect time to set the next date. And a lot of our customers with vehicles with extended oil life intervals and changes in the maintenance that cars do require, sometimes 2 times a year now is the right amount of visits for, I'd say, probably 60% of all of our clients. So those 2 appointments are the appointment. Now, the exceptions that we make for that is if we know that we're going to have to do something larger in the way of a maintenance, we will purposely have them come in one extra time, say in August or, right now we're booking January and February up with the things that can't wait until the spring. Because with that many regular customers needing their tires changed, we just don't have the time to do other maintenance things while you're doing all the tire changes. So,
well, how many tires do you have in storage?
About 700 sets.
Sets. And where do you store them, in your building?
Yep. In the building we've built two large storage areas with a racking system, and then we have 2 tractor trailers right beside the building that are full.
Wow. So they're coming back and you make those appointments. Just one quick thing. I don't know if you saw this article that I wrote recently, but I was asking this question to myself. Like, a lot of cars sit idling and the engine's running, but the wheels aren't turning. And so I did some research and I found out, according to Ford, that when a car sits idling for an hour, it's equal to 40 kilometers of driving or 25 miles. So I did some research and found out that the highest, for example, in Canada is Vancouver. The highest in the U.S. is Los Angeles, where a person spends 87 hours a year idling. We're not talking about 87 hours of commute. We're talking about during that commute that the vehicle's sitting idling for 87 hours, which is the equivalent of an extra oil change for a lot of customers. Mm-hmm. And so I don't. Have you seen that article?
I don't recall that one. I don't recall that. But you know, definitely makes sense.
Yeah, and so you're not in Toronto, which is this third highest in the country. Yeah. But I lived in Toronto for a while. There's like 7.9 million people, and how many vehicles are there? You know, I was talking to somebody in Toronto once, and they said, "Do you have any idea how many repair shops, I should say, are in this town?" I said, "Do you have any idea how many cars there are? Like, there are cars backed up for miles and miles." I was on the 401 at midnight, and there was a traffic jam because they closed one of the lanes or something. Yeah. So it's not just about mileage; it's about hours on the engine. Planes are tracked in hours, boats are tracked in hours, and cars are tracked in mileage, and yet, so that's an impact as well. Okay, anything else that you want to add to this, Jim?
Well, Merry Christmas.
How much has this changed your business, is my question. This one thing of pre-booking appointments.
Well, it's just been one of the main cogs in the wheel that have made us the shop that we are. You know, other shop owners, and I hesitate to say this because it sounds like, you know, being boastful, but lots of shop owners say they wish they had the business that we do, and I tell them it's doable. You just have to look after people the way they need to be looked after. So booking the next appointment, being a maintenance shop, you know, having the proper amount of technicians and the available hours, you know, it's just all part of the recipe you have to work with to create a successful shop.
So it's not just luck.
No, it's not luck.
By the way, I've told people your story many times. I've called you the king of pre-booking appointments. You've not been dethroned. I don't know anybody who has 700. I commend you. But I've had people say, well, it's different in Waterloo. I have different customers. I'm in a different area. And as a trainer who's been to all across Canada, all 50 states, so many people think it's different here, it's different here, it's different here. Cars are cars. People are people. People are busy everywhere.
That's for sure.
And the fact that you're taking care of this for them is because you chose to do it. It's not because you're lucky or the town that you happen to be in. Anyway, Jim, I really appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much. And encouraging to find out that you made this transition yourself, and everybody else can as well.
Okay.
Thanks,
Jim. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, thanks.
Back to you.